The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is back in session. It is July 23rd, 2026, and as all of you know by now, I decided to skip doing a video on the 20th because not enough shit was going on. But what do you know? A day after the 20th, something big happened. And if anything, I think it's an admission of failure by the Ukrainian state. So, what exactly happened was that the Russian-born commander of the entirety of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, who has been in charge since February 2024, basically the end of the Battle of Avdiivka, he was fired. Syrsky has been relieved of his duties and has been replaced by a guy from Western Ukraine. I think he comes from the Khmelnytsky Oblast, which is pretty deep inside Western Ukraine. So we're talking about someone that has perhaps potential nationalistic like energy to him. And from what I have researched, he is very nationalistic. Mikhailo Daperty, I think that's his name. He took over the position as the commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, and he promises to implement the reforms put out by the recently fired Minister of Defense, Fedorov, who, by the way, is born in Russian-occupied Vasilivka in Zaporizhia region. So, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff has happened in Kiev itself, despite the fact that they're probably going to get bombed again soon, because they keep destroying the mail in Russia itself. I don't know why they keep doing that, but I guess they want to piss off more Russians to the point where they get mobilized. But yeah, Syrsky was fired. And to be quite honest with you guys, I think it has come too little too late. Why? Let me explain. When Syrsky was first promoted to this position of being the commander of the entire AFU, he was tasked to halt the Russian advance in Donetsk region, and also to keep grinding them down in Kharkiv region as well. Unfortunately, he decided to do something that, to this day, many still don't understand. He invaded the Kursk region in Western Russia. I know it may sound like a joke, but trust me, it did happen. And no, I'm not fucking with any of you. He actually did that, and it cost the Ukrainians tens of thousands of men, and I don't know how many destroyed vehicles. They lost a lot of shit invading Kursk region. And also, they briefly did something in Belgrade too, but that didn't last too long. So, Syrsky was fired after his failures on the front line, but also due to the political dispute he had with Fedorov. And it seems to me that Syrsky is leaving behind a huge mess, especially in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv regions. The Dnipropetrovsk is under control for now, but I don't know if that's going to last forever. In fact, I think it's on a clock with the news coming in from Dolpila. But yeah, so let's try to explain exactly what he has left behind. So Syrsky had to deal with a Russian army that was advancing across the entirety of Donbas. And throughout most of 2024, the Russians were able to take advantage of their success in Avdiivka. And as a result, they reached the outskirts of Krasnaya Amisk, aka Pokrovsk. And they have also reached the outskirts too, I think, of Konstantinovka. And also seized a big chunk of Toretsk city. It was also during this time in 2024 that Ugledar fell, Karakove, Ukrainsk, Giernik, Krakivka. And also, we cannot forget that the Russians also successfully encircled the Velika Novosilka during 2024 or so. And then I think the town then fell in the new year of 2025, right after Biden left. And then in 2025 itself, sorry if I'm saying things weirdly because, well, I'm kind of quirky like that. The Russians then further advanced towards the border with Zaporizhia in Dnipropetrovsk regions. They entered the Dnipropetrovsk region for the very first time since 2022 and have taken a number of settlements. And then they started the battle for Pokrovsk. They lost Pokrovsk. They lost Munograd. They lost completely Chazov Yar and Toretsk. And they lost Siversk. That's another big L. And then you have the Russians advancing to the outskirts of Slovyansk and the Kramatorsk in 2026. So take all that into consideration. Syrsky was overlooking a Donetsk region that was, I think, 55% controlled by Russia at the time when he took over for Zaluzhny, who, by the way, hated Zelensky's ass. I think he wanted to punch him or strangle him to death or something because of his bad decisions in Bakhmut and also in the Zaporizhia counteroffensive. But more importantly, it was under Syrsky's leadership that the Ukrainians have lost, I think, 25% more of Donetsk region. So 55 plus 20 would be 75. So then plus another 5 would then be 80. So right now, as you're looking on this map, Ukrainians now only control around probably 18 to 20% of Donetsk region. And the news, of course, coming from the northern part is not looking good for the Ukrainians. In fact, I think they're on their last legs there. Though I don't think it's all going to completely fall until around at least the first half of 2027. At the latest, that is. But yeah, Syrsky is leaving behind a huge mess, and also things are not looking good too in the Kharkiv region. The Russians are on their way back to reversing what was lost in 2022 during that infamous counteroffensive by the Ukrainians. And let's also not forget that the Russians are also knocking on Sumy region's door too. Syrsky was also responsible for forcefully mobilizing a bunch of people off the street. Well, mostly guys my age, if not a little older. And yeah, his methods got a lot of backlash. And a lot of people called for him to be fired for the last year or two because of these methods. That's part of the reason why he was so hated. Because he wanted to send all these guys who were very young, send them off to war, and put them on suicide missions done for the purpose of, I guess, giving Zelensky's PR team something to be happy about, and in turn, Ukraine fanboys. It's just, I can't believe they let this guy stay on the job for this long. He should have been fired at least after 2024. When it became clear that the Kursk offensive was a failure, they should have just axed him right there. But I think the reason why they held off on doing that for so long was for the very simple reason that Zelensky didn't really have another choice. He didn't really have another alternative to Syrsky. Because after Zaluzhny was fired, who was going to replace him? It was obviously logical that Syrsky was the man because he was the only one who could really do it. And it also brings to question about the competence of the armed forces of Ukraine nowadays. And if you also ask for my opinion, I don't really know if the new guy, Daprati, is going to really change anything. It is so late into the war. I mean, Syrsky was made commander 2 years ago, and 2 years, as you know, has passed. A lot has changed since then. Donbas is not far from falling to Russia completely. Gulay-Polay is gone. Russia is making a comeback in Kharkiv and Sumy regions. I mean, it's literally not the same situation as it was in 2024 when Zaluzhny was still the commander. And based on what I've heard, it looks like he's going to be more focused on technology and drones than, I guess, more manpower, like Syrsky focused on. I mean, say all you want about Syrsky, but he understood that in order to stop the Russian advances, they needed to put a shit ton of guys out on the front to hold the lines, to grind the Russians as much as possible, to the point that they would force them to a ceasefire deal. But so far, that said ceasefire has not come. And if they decide to do this method of trading land for time, that's going to be suicide for the Ukrainians. And I personally believe that it probably won't be too long before the Russians take more of Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk regions. I just don't think that method works. And yeah, the Ukrainians are hitting their targets in Moscow, maybe St. Petersburg, and I think Krasnodar, Novorossiysk, Sevastopol, Rostov-on-Don, you name it, all the major cities in Western Russia. They're going to definitely hit their targets with flamingos, drones. I mean, again, you name it. But I don't think that this is a winning strategy. I think it's just a cope. It's a desperate play by Zelensky to try to force the Russians to the negotiation table. So yeah, I don't know where all this is going to go, but as I said, I think it's too little too late for the armed forces of Ukraine to make this change at commander now. It's way too late. So anyway, let's get to the front line and see what's going on. So first of all, the Stepnogorsk direction. The Russians are reportedly striking back in this area. They apparently have re-entered the northern, main part of Stepnogorsk, and basically it's sort of back to what it was throughout 2025, when it was just back and forth fighting within the north and central parts of the city or the town. Plavny is looking promising for the Ukrainians, but so far the Russians have been able to stabilize the situation there for now. And then in the Orekhov direction, Russians are continuing to advance on the roads that go into Orekhov itself. And as far as I know, Danilivka, Dolinica, Rovno, and Lyubitsky are all contested by the Russians in some shape or form. The situation is still confusing in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Apparently, the Russians are starting to strike back here in this area, but Ukrainians claim that they have cleared out Berezhovo and Turnovo. Weird. And also, Ukrainians have also claimed to have broken through in the area of Komar and Bogatyr and have gotten as far as this. But they're taking heavy casualties in doing so. I think this was one of Syrsky's last orders before he was fired. Oh, and that's another thing I want to mention before we continue on the video. I heard Fedorov was reportedly fired, not because of because of Zelensky siding with Syrsky, but because of the recent problems that they've been having in Odessa with all the missiles and drones striking all the ports within Odessa. So that could be another factor. The Black Sea is effectively a gray zone. Nobody can use it. But anyway, getting back to the front, Novopavlovka situation is all but the same, though Ukrainians are gaining some ground in the area of Filia. Ukrainians have also reportedly have recaptured Moravka, but I don't really know if this is 100% true. There's also reports that the Russians have seized some empty ground within Dnipropetrovsk region in this direction, which is outside of the city of Pokrovsk or Krasnoyarsk, and they even made some headway towards the village or town of Sergivka, right here. Now, this is a direction I think you guys may want to keep an eye on. As the Russians' fate in the Dnipropetrovsk region, well, in this area of the Dnieper region that is uncertain, I'd keep an eye on here because this area goes to Mrzova and Pavlograd. But so yeah, I think you guys should keep an eye on this area because you never know what could happen here because there's trouble being reported in Dolpila. And once Dolpila falls to the armed forces of Russia, then we can definitely assume that Russia is going to be able to break through into Dnipropetrovsk region here from the northwestern side, or northeastern side, sorry. Northwestern would then be Kryvyi Rih or something like this here, like maybe like adjacent to Kirovograd region, but this is the northeastern side. So anyway, if they're able to break through here, then they pretty much don't really need this area anymore. Like, I'm not joking. They won't really need it. And if Ukrainians try to claim that they have retaken full control of the region, the Russians then can respond with, are you sure about that? So, yeah, there you go. Russians are on the move in the Dnipropetrovsk region, at least in this area. And then going in the direction of Dolpila, which I mentioned a minute or so ago, there is a damning report that just came out from this direction. And apparently it's Bieletsky. Bieletsky is a town north of Rudensky, which is a suburb of Minograd and Pokrovsk. And Bieletsky, by the way, is to Dolpila what Rudensky is to Pokrovsk. They're like gateways to their, I guess, anchor cities. Like, Bieletsky is like the anchor, like the defense anchor for Dolpila, while Rudensky is the defense anchor for Pokrovsk. You get what I'm saying here. So, yeah, Bieletsky has fallen to Russia, but Syriac, though, is keeping it in a gray zone for now. And there's also reports that the Russians have advanced quite deep into Dolpila, the eastern section of the city, that is. I don't know if it's DRGs or actual Russian troops. But in addition, there's more trouble in the north. Hanivka is now contested, so that would mean that this road here is now cut up for the Ukrainians. So there's only like one road to get into Dolpila, and that's through this road right here. It goes from Kramatorsk all the way to Alexandrovka, and then through Novodonetsky, then to below Syrsky, and then finally to Dolpila. Pretty long, and not as smooth sailing as the road from Kramatorsk would be. So yeah, Dolpila is now encircled from two sides, and I'm expecting it to be from three sides soon, because the Russians are advancing from the south as well. And should Dolpila fall, as I said earlier regarding Dnipropetrovsk, the Russians can then advance either north towards Alexandrovka here, which Simon of Vice News visited in 2014 during those controversial elections, or they can advance toward the west and enter these empty fields of the Dnipropetrovsk region and take a big chunk of it. All this empty land will be theirs. And perhaps even enter the Kharkiv region and enter the city of Lazova. But that's me getting ahead of myself. That probably won't happen until like 2027 or so, but moving on. Konstantinovka direction, not much changes here, though we can assume that the seeds are being planted for the offensive on Drushkovka. Torske is also now contested too by the Russian army, so we can assume that, I guess, Group Center is advancing towards Drushkovka from their position, while Group Yug is clearing out Konstantinovka. And this pocket here, which is southwest of Chazov Yar, is being cleared out. Isivka is mostly gray zone now, along with Bizimyane. Popasne is still going to be under Ukrainian control for the time being until further notice, but I'm expecting that to fall as well soon. And then because of the recent news, I think it's quite obvious that Chazov Yar is pretty much now gone completely, so we can essentially say that the battle there has concluded for real this time. And then going further to the north, in the area of Slavyansk and the Kramatorsk, the Russian DRGs have reportedly have continued pushing towards these high terrain areas that overlook Kramatorsk city. And then AMK Mapping has reported that the first DRGs have entered Mykolaiivka. So Donbas is looking pretty cooked. No news from Liman direction. It's probably the same old bullshit. And same with this area here too, that we can assume the Ukrainians are pushing hard, though they're losing a lot of guys in the process. Again, that's a Syrsky thing and not what Drapati is going to have in mind next. And also no changes too in the Kupiansk direction. Now, in the northeastern Kharkiv direction, things are also unraveling for the armed forces of Ukraine. Volokivsky has been reportedly been captured by the Russians, though Syriac has it in a gray zone. Zakharivka is on the brink of falling to the Russians, and there's also reports that Russia has also entered Ivanivka, right here. And also that they're making progress too in the small town of Bely Kolodiez. Grafsky is also now back under full Russian control, thanks to geolocations provided by the group of forces north. And there are no changes in the area of Kozacha Lopan. Sumy is largely the same, though we can assume that the Russians are continuing to push on the villages north of these forested areas here. And then finally, to conclude this video, Russians are continuing to push in the fields not far from the city of Glukov, or Glukiv. And that's going to do it for today's video. So tell me in the comment section below what you think of Syrsky's firing the new commander of the armed forces of Ukraine. Do you guys think he's going to make any sort of promising changes for the Ukrainians for the better? Or are we going to see much of the same crap that has been happening for them in the last 2 years since Syrsky was first promoted? I mean, as I said, I don't think much is going to change for them, and I think that they're already far beyond the point of no return. Ukraine is cooked. The end. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's video, everybody. I'll see you all again in 3 days from now, and I hope you all have a great evening. So take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.